What kind of man would set fire to his own villages just to starve, confuse and demoralize an invading army? In the spring of 1462, Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and conqueror of Constantinople, launched a military campaign into Wallachia to crush the resistance of Vlad III, voivode of Wallachia, known to history as Vlad III or Vlad the Impaler. What the Sultan encountered was not a standing army awaiting battle in open fields, but a scorched and desolate land poisoned by its own ruler. As the Ottoman army advanced across the Danube into Wallachia, they entered a wasteland. According to contemporaneous accounts, including the writings of the Byzantine chronicler Leonikos Chalkokondyles, Vlad ordered the systematic destruction of crops, wells, and entire villages. Homes were burned, granaries emptied or destroyed, and livestock either slaughtered or driven away. This was not mere cruelty. It was a strategic act of resistance. Vlad knew that his forces, numbering far fewer than Mehmed's estimated 90,000 troops, could not hope to win a traditional engagement. Instead, he turned Wallachia itself into a weapon. Entire populations were evacuated or eradicated in the path of the Ottomans, ensuring that the enemy would find no shelter, no food, and no information. According to a letter written by Vlad himself to Matthias Corvinus of Hungary in 1462, he described the tactic with brutal clarity. "I have killed peasants, men and women, old and young. We have burned down everything." This document, preserved in the Hungarian National Archives, is one of the rare first-hand accounts where Vlad unapologetically details his scorched earth campaign. The policy worked. Ottoman troops, unfamiliar with the terrain and suffering from disease and starvation, found themselves in a hostile land stripped of resources. Morale began to crumble. Soldiers reportedly abandoned their posts in fear, their ranks thinned not by battle, but by exhaustion, hunger, and despair. This was not warfare as the Ottomans knew it. It was annihilation without confrontation. And it was only the beginning. Heads displayed on spikes at the fortress gates. At the heart of Vlad Tepes's uncompromising resistance against the Ottoman Empire stood a calculated use of psychological warfare. As Mehmed II's army pressed into Wallachian territory in the summer of 1462, they encountered more than just a ravaged countryside. When they reached the fortresses guarding Wallachia's interior, particularly the citadel of Târgoviște, they were met with a chilling and unmistakable warning. Thousands of symbolic remnants displayed on high wooden stakes. This tactic, confirmed in multiple contemporaneous sources including the writings of the Venetian ambassador to Buda and Ottoman chroniclers such as Tursun Bey, was not only meant to repel intruders, but to paralyze them with fear. At the entrance of Târgoviște, a carefully arranged forest of fallen figures and mounted tokens awaited the Sultan. But the forms placed on stakes outside the fortress gates held a different symbolic role. These were trophies, not of nobility, but of captured Ottoman soldiers, scouts, and even diplomats, whose punishments had been deliberately staged for maximum psychological impact. Some of the exhibited figures belonged to high-ranking Ottoman envoys sent by Mehmed prior to the invasion. According to the 15th century Saxon chronicle from Brasov, Vlad punished these messengers after they refused to remove their turbans before him, claiming religious observance. Vlad reportedly responded, "Then let them be nailed to their heads in respect of their customs, and had their turbans affixed before presenting them on stakes." While the exact wording cannot be verified, the event is documented in both Saxon and Slavic sources, underscoring Vlad's zero tolerance for perceived defiance. Beyond the gates of fortresses, roads leading to major towns such as Bucharest and Târgoviște were also lined with stakes bearing grim remains, some newly positioned, others worn by time. Ottoman soldiers reportedly recoiled in horror, and contemporary Ottoman chroniclers admitted that even the hardened warriors in Mehmed's army were shaken by the sight. Impalement, Vlad's signature terror tactic. For Vlad III of Wallachia, known to his contemporaries as Vlad III, meaning the Impaler, impalement was not merely a punishment. It was a weapon of statecraft, a performance of control intended to instill fear in enemies, discipline his own people, and define his rule in a region constantly contested by empires. Impalement as a method of execution was not invented by Vlad. It existed in various forms across the medieval world, including within the Ottoman Empire itself. However, Vlad refined it into a public display of calculated intimidation. Ottoman, Saxon, and Slavic chroniclers alike record how Vlad employed impalement on an unprecedented scale during his reign from 1456 to 1462. The process involved driving a long wooden stake through the person's body, typically from the lower torso and upward, sometimes exiting through the upper body. Those punished were placed on the stake while still alive, and the stake was intentionally shaped to slow down the end. The punished could remain in this state for hours, even days. Vlad's officials took care to position the figures in deliberate rows, formations, and heights, producing what foreign observers described as entire forests of fallen bodies. One of the most well-documented uses of mass impalement occurred in 1462, as Sultan Mehmed II's forces approached Targovishte. Chroniclers such as Antonio Bonfini and Leonikos Chalkokondyles describe how Vlad ordered the display of approximately 20,000 captives, primarily Ottoman prisoners, but also some Wallachian subjects accused of disloyalty. These bodies were positioned on stakes outside the city in deliberate symmetry. The sheer scale of the punishment was designed to confront Mehmed directly as he approached the capital. The Ottoman sources confirm the psychological effect. Tursun Bey, a historian present during Mehmed's campaign, recorded that the Sultan halted his advance upon witnessing the field of impalements and was visibly disturbed by what he saw. Mehmed, accustomed to warfare, reportedly remarked that one could not defeat a man who treated his enemies, and his own people, with such severity. But impalement was not limited to times of war. Vlad used the punishment regularly within Wallachia to enforce discipline and punish theft, dishonesty, and betrayal. Even minor offences could result in impalement if Vlad deemed the violation a threat to order. According to a report by the Saxon chronicler Michael Beheim, Vlad once sentenced a woman in this way for lying about her husband's labour to avoid work, an act he considered a danger to civic virtue. To his enemies, impalement was terror. To Vlad, it was justice, order, and dominance. Mutilated and sent home, Vlad's brutal warning to the Sultan. During the relentless campaign of 1462, Vlad Tepes, voivode of Wallachia, confronted the advancing Ottoman Empire not only with scorched earth and forests of symbolic executions, but with an even more personal form of psychological warfare: the deliberate marking and release of selected Ottoman captives. These survivors were not spared out of mercy. They were transformed into walking warnings, living messengers meant for Sultan Mehmed II. According to contemporaneous chronicles, including Slavic sources compiled in the Skazani o Dracule Vovode, the tale of Prince Dracula, Vlad visibly disfigured Ottoman prisoners before releasing them. Eyes were damaged, noses and ears removed, and others were permanently scarred or had their limbs impaired. These acts were not improvised cruelty, but carefully orchestrated punishments intended to terrify the Sultan's forces and destabilize morale. Beyond physical harm, Vlad reportedly humiliated prisoners before sending them away. According to 15th century Slavic texts, he sometimes branded captives with hot irons or etched symbolic shapes into their skin, punishments that fused bodily torment with cultural mockery. Some historians interpret these as acts of religious provocation toward Muslim prisoners, although this view is not consistently confirmed across all sources. This strategy mirrored Vlad's wider use of terror as a form of deterrence. Unlike executions, which ended a message, these scarred survivors were spared, not to live freely, but to speak fear into others. Their altered forms spoke louder than any scroll could deliver. To Mehmed II, who had conquered Constantinople just 9 years earlier, this cruelty was an insult not only to military custom, but to imperial pride. A ruler who returned his enemies in pieces was stating, without diplomacy or restraint, that he feared no reprisal. Vlad's maimed captives weren't accidents, they were proclamations. They returned not as fighters, but as proof of the Impaler's resolve. Vlad Tepes weaponized terror with a cold precision that echoed far beyond 1462, reshaping Balkan resistance and forcing even Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, to hesitate. His scorched earth, forests of stakes, and maimed envoys remind us how power can turn cruelty into strategy, fear into policy. Which of Vlad's tactics do you think most undermined Ottoman morale, scorched villages, displayed captives, or marked survivors? Comment below. In the end, the message was not carved into stone. It was left to fade on the stake.